All right, I'll get started. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks everyone that is going to take the time after to log on and watch the recording. As you know, we have a members ballot out at the moment for the draft agreement. There was a question at one point around why we're doing a members ballot, not an all-employee ballot. There's a good reason for that. Under Newman, when the LNP were last in power, there was agreements that they tried to drive through without union agreement to them. They tried to push out all employee ballots to the core. Both of them were defeated. But the Act now says that the Commission can't certify an agreement unless all parties to the agreement have signed it. We're a party, we're the other party to the agreement. There's QCS and there's us. Under our rules, we're not going to sign an agreement without our members endorsing it. So our members make it really clear, our rules make it really clear. Delegates, our elected delegates through our conference structure can set the strategy around bargaining, but they have to ensure that members get a say on what's in the log of claims and also whether we endorse. So the reason there's this ballot is this is absolutely up to members. If members vote this up, then we will sign off on it and it will go to an all-employee ballot. If members don't, it never gets there. So I know there's a bit out there of, well, how come we don't get a vote on it? They will get a vote on it if they're not a member, but you get to decide whether we agree with it, and therefore whether there's a vote at all. If they want to have a say in that, they get to join the union. It's really easy. So that's why that process is happening. We've gone through, so just a quick recap of where we got to. So in 2019, we had negotiations. We'd written to them early on saying, hang on, here's our log of claims, but we've got a problem with 1212, so you need to sort out that. They refused to sort it out. They gave us an offer that was only 2.5 for everybody. It cut conditions out of the 2016 EB, and it cut conditions out of the award. It also, they did say they'd pay base award wages if we agreed to lose all the progression, which would have meant people then got stopped at 1.4 if they only had a Cert 4 and 1.7 if they had a diploma. So that was what roundly rejected. There was a period of industrial action. We paused that, and I've seen some chat about good faith. We paused it for about 2 weeks for good faith to allow them to withdraw the shit offer and come back with a better one. They didn't, so we started industrial action. The pause went for 2 weeks. We had an initial spate where a whole lot of centres did stuff, and then there was a 2-week pause, and then if you'll recall, we had basically a roster of which centre could take action over a 24 period, and at the centre you decided what you were going to take. We went through to that. We ended up in arbitration. The arbitration was on hold because of 1212, because you couldn't work out what was a fair pay rise until you worked out what was a legal pay limit. We've now got 1212. That's great. There was early to mid last year, there was some negotiations held that eventually went nowhere. They were trying to look at some sort of settlement. There was some discussions about a changed classification structure, which I'll get to later on in response to one of the questions. It would deal with some of the anomalies around 1.9s, how people get into the 2s and so forth. But we were unable to get any agreement from members. Some of the structures that were put out were rejected. We just didn't have time to do it properly. And it was a small group to see if there was some sort of settlement, and there just wasn't the capacity to do it as widely as it needed to. So there was that. There was also some discussions about fixing the ASA going to actual penalty rates. That was horrendous when we got a whole lot of rosters and what people would be paid if you got actuals. And from fortnight to fortnight, you'd have up to a $200, $300 discrepancy in what you got paid each fortnight. So they went nowhere. It then dragged on and on. and I must admit, at no point did we think the court was going to take anywhere near as long as it did. And we started to see member action. So there was a picket outside Mark Ryan's office. There was a picket outside Grace Grace's office. There was then a big meeting outside One William where we had heaps of people in. We got a meeting with the minister at that point, and that forced the offer. We didn't see the offer before it came. There was things in the offer that addressed some of our concerns. There was things that were not in the offer that we would have liked to have seen. Sick leave is an obvious one of those. But the offer is what it was, and it was that or arbitration. This was before 1212 was handed down. Two things in the offer that really jumped out was the wording around the aggregated shift allowance. So there was some wording in the aggregated shift allowance which said it compensates for a pattern of overs and unders. And the way it was worded was particularly concerning because there was a potential that it would mean if we got a roster that had way too many nights or weekends, we wouldn't be able to arbitrate that. That was a problem for us. There was also the issue around face-to-face handovers. The way that was written was really broad and effectively could have ended up misinterpreted to have, like, on the words that were in the offer, theoretically they could say to everyone, you need to be on your station 15 minutes before your shift starts so you could get a briefing. So we had some significant concerns around that. What we've done to address that in terms of the ASA, there is now a clause, and you'll see it in the agreement, but the draft says, in developing new rosters, regard will be given to a reasonable pattern of penalty shifts, given regard to the compensation provided by the aggregated shift allowance. And then there will be, as part of the explanatory material that goes out for the all-employee ballot, there will be, it will say that nothing in the agreement prevents a party from referring the matter to the QIRC for conciliation or arbitration in accordance with the dispute, the shift procedures in the agreement, if in our view or their view a new roster is not reasonable. So that will allow us to continue to challenge rosters where we think the pattern is unreasonable. And I think we're going to do that. There's some rosters that even with the increase in aggregated shift allowance still will be too high. And the other thing that has been asked and is true is the aggregated shift allowance increase of 3% also absorbs the half-day Christmas Eve public holiday that came in since 2016 and the Easter Sunday public holiday. Now, they're worth 1.237%. We've got a calculator and we've worked all that out. So that reduces the increase to an extent. You're still getting paid more for the ASA. It is still a 3% increase, but there is a reduction in those public holidays. So that we've already put that into the calculator that we use when we get new rosters. We will continue to calculate those. And I think we're going to, at some point in the next year, I think we need to run a test case on a roster. And there's a few that I've got my eye on that are quite high. And we need to run and arbitrate that. So I think those protections are there. The material that's in the explanatory notes, you can use that in interpretation. So if at any point we were running something and the QCS wanted to argue just what the words on the agreement say, there is a whole stack of case law going all the way to the High Court that says you can bring in extrinsic material that shows what the intent of the parties was at the time. So if we've got material that goes out with the ballot that says that clause doesn't stop us arbitrating, then we're safe with that. The same issue with the handover. So the handover is initially, if you saw the first draft, it was very broad. what we've now done is we've included, firstly, the heading of the clause says shift hander to brief incoming officers. So all a bit about additional time applies to where it's part of a brief. It says, and you'll see it's in 3.7, that sort of handover should be performed within 15 minutes. It includes normal activities such as handing over a green state. It does not include functions or activities that would normally attract overtime payments, including a direction to conduct additional headcounts or to respond to codes occurring around shift changeover. And there'll also be explanatory material that says the clause is not intended to extend the length of time of the rostered shift or delay staff from completing their structured day within their rostered shift. So we think that's addressed those. In terms of some of the questions I've got through, a question that's come through a lot is the 1250 payment still there? Yes, it is. If you have a look at clause 2.2 of the agreement, and it's a little funny because it's written in the past tense. It says, in recognition of the 1250 that was paid on successful ballots. So that's because when we certify the agreement, the 1250 will have already been paid. The commitment is when the employee ballots are not ours, but the employee ballot gets up, they'll pay the 1250. That's also when they're proposing to start issuing the polo shirts as well. So 1250 is there. It's in 2.2. It's written in the past tense because by the time the agreement's certified, it will have been paid. Just a question I saw come up around if you return from a hospital escort after, at say 19:05, will this include 15 minutes overtime? In my view, yes, it will. That's not part of the ordinary day. It's got nothing to do with handover and to brief incoming officers. It's you were not released from the hospital in time to get back in time. So in my view, that absolutely continues to attract overtime because that's one of those normal activities that attract overtime. Another question we had is about the fact that there's no increase in sick leave, and that's the case. It wasn't in the offer. It was one we were really pushing for. It's important to note that the current State Act, the Queensland Industrialisation Act, defines a day for the purposes of sick leave as meaning 1/5 of the number of ordinary hours in a week. So your ordinary hours are a 38-hour week. A day for under the Act for the purposes of sick leave is 1/5 of that. So that's your not your 12-hour shift. That the Act does say that it means that or what's in a certified agreement. So if they put it in a certified agreement, then we could have had 12. We were pushing for that. At one stage, I think that was looking reasonably good to at least potentially get an increase. The problem we had is during the wait, the High Court handed down what's commonly known as the Cadbury case, Mondelez, and the High Court, because there was a decision under the Federal Act, which wouldn't have been made under the State Act, because the State Act did define a day as 7.6. But under the Federal Act, there was a decision that a day might mean a day. So if you were 12-hour days under the Fair Work Act, there was a decision from the federal court saying it was a 12-hour day. That was overturned by the High Court. The High Court said no. If you're looking into the history of sick leave, it's 2 weeks worth of sick leave, 10 days, and that's 10 ordinary days. So basically, the High Court decided that for the purposes of the Fair Work Act, the definition was the same as what already existed in the State Act. We will continue to push for it, but it is not in the offer. There was a question about leave not attracting the aggregated shift allowance. That's the case. There's a question about why is it only corrections? It's actually not only corrections. State Government Protective Security also has an aggregated shift allowance. It's the only other one I know in the sector. They also do not get paid the ASA went on sick leave or annual leave. There was actually a decision. We did test this back in the 2000s. We did test this under the QIRC, Commissioner Beckley. There was a decision handed down. And also, like health, where there's no aggregated shift allowance, you get paid penalties if you work the shift. So it's actually the norm not to get penalties, or in our case, the aggregated shift allowance in lieu of actuals when on leave. But it's not in the agreement. There was a question about the 1250 and how's the pro rata done if you're a part-timer. Basically, it means if you're a 0.5 part-timer, you will get half 1250. If you're 0.6 part-timer, you'll get 0.6 of 1250. So it's just worked out on the hours that you're on at the time it's certified. Well, sorry, no, it'll be at the time the agreement gets up, the vote gets up. There was a question saying, why are we overselling this? The agreement is 10% over 2.5. I hope we're not overselling this. There are good things in this agreement. There are things that are not good and we would prefer. It's not perfect. There's other things you'd like. But I don't think it's true to say that it's 10%, not 12.5. So the agreement goes 4 years from 1 September 2021. The agreement will say there is a 2.5% paid in September 21. Now, there was also a state wage increase of 2.5% September 21 as well. So the award went up, and anyone from 1.8 and above went up by 2.5 because that's what the award went up. Anyone below 1.1 or people from 1.1 to 1.7, we got an interim order made to pay them. That interim would have been absorbed into the final agreement. But the life of the agreement is from 1 September 2021 through to 30th of October 2025. In that time, correctional officers will get a 2.5% increase on 1 September 21, 2.5 on 1 March 22, so just gone, that will be backdated, 2.5 1 September 22, 2.5 1 September 23, and 2.5 1 September 24. So over the life of the agreement, there will be 12.5. The fact that if there was not an agreement, there would have been 2.5 paid by the fact that the award went up, that is true. And we put back in the clause that says if during the life of this agreement the award overtakes, doesn't matter what level, everyone will get the award payments. This is a problem that has come about because the government's wages policy of depressing wages by 2.5 right across the board has meant the award has caught up. The award has caught up for two reasons. One, there was a big increase in the award in 2010, I think. It was just before Newman got in. There was a clause put in all agreements that allowed the rates from the previous certified agreement to go into awards. So if you look at the awards, there was actually a 10% jump in the award rate. It's about 10%. Back in, I think it was 2011. That didn't matter because all the agreement rates were above the award. So what it did is it just, instead of the safety net being all the way down there, it lifted the safety net up to here. Then the government has depressed wages, which has allowed the award to overtake. That we've made sure that going forward that will be there. So if the award goes ahead, we're not going to see what happened as a result of what we fixed in 1212. But over the life of this agreement, there is a 12.5% increase in pay on top of the lift up to the award wages for the 1.1s to 1.7s. There was another question about the leave loading and the issue that the leave loading remains at 27.5. This is a problem going forward. Leave loading is separate to aggregated shift allowance. So when the aggregated shift allowance first came in, it was 25% when it was first introduced back in the very late 90s when corrections moved to 12-hour shifts. The aggregated shift allowance was 2.5. So leave loading was 27.5. You got an increase when you went on holidays. We then negotiated aggregated shift up in 2 tranches. The first tranche, I think it might have got close to 27.5. I was before my time. I could go back and find it. The second tranche went to the 28.5, which then meant the aggregated shift was above the leave loading. We're going to have to address this in the next agreement, because we've now got this big gap of a 4% gap between the aggregated shift allowance and leave loading. People need to be aware of that. When they go on holidays, they need to take into account that the leave loading remains what the leave loading is. We will seek to increase it in future agreements, but they are 2 separate things. So people absolutely need to be aware of that. The alternative is you don't get an increase in ASA, and I don't think that would have been palatable, but it's certainly a problem. Darren's just asked why the next agreement. The reason, Darren, is it is in this agreement. So it wasn't something that's in the offer. The agreement says the aggregated shift allowance is 27.5. So I think we will start agitating around it, but it's a clause in this agreement. So it would be a further claim to try and get it changed. So hopefully, I think that answers that question. But it is a problem. It's a problem because we've increased the ASA, but it's something that needs to be addressed. That's all the questions that there was one other question that came through, and it's about the 1-9s. There was a statement that people with a diploma were entitled to a pay increase or to 2 levels above people without the diploma. I think that's not accurate. There was barriers that said you couldn't get past 1-4 if you didn't have a Cert 4, and then you could progress to 1-7, and you couldn't get past 1-7 unless you had a diploma, and then you could progress to 1-9. There was also at one point a clause that said you could have a degree that wasn't relevant at all. You could have an arts degree with a philosophy major, and that would allow you to progress to 2-4. So sitting there saying people with a diploma were entitled to 2 pay points above people who didn't, well, by the same logic, people with a degree in basket weaving were entitled to a pay points to 6 pay points above people that didn't. There is still unfinished work around the class structure. There is a fundamental problem with the class structure. We do need to do something around the people at 1-8, 1-9. That's still a significant barrier. And we've got this structure which is unique to corrections, where base grade effectively is all of level 1 and all of level 2, and then supervisors are all of level 2 and all level 3. So you've got this overlap where you can be base grade on 2-4 and have less responsibility than the person who's supervising you that may be on 2-1 because they've just become a supervisor. That is an odd structure. I think if we didn't have the issues of 12-12, there may have been some appetite with the department. There was certainly some discussions about how would you create a structure that was more based on you have this set of responsibilities and you get paid for it, then you get additional responsibilities that you're paid for, and you get additional responsibilities that you're paid for. We still need to do that. I think there is some appetite. It's not in the agreement, but there certainly has been discussions with the department about reviewing the classification structure. I would like to do something that recognises the skills, if people have a diploma and are using those skills, getting remunerated for it. And I think that's where we need to go. We need to go to not just I get paid more because I have a qualification. I get paid more because I have a qualification or skills and experience equivalent to that qualification, and I am using them in the job, so I should get paid for that. I think that is that's how class structures generally should work. So I think there's still ongoing work to do. I don't think this offer does everything. But I guess what the other thing I would say, and I said this on the 12/12 briefing I gave, the reality is in 12/12, the court has recognised we got a windfall. The court recognised that because of 12/12, we've effectively got all those progression increases by removing the barriers for free. If we went to arbitration, the commission is likely to take that into account. The commission, and it's a horrible saying, but cuts the baby in half. It's a biblical reference to the wisdom of Solomon. But the commission will, in arbitration, try not to change the balance between the parties. It will put something in place so at the next set of negotiations, they can try and negotiate an outcome. So the commission is likely to take into account the big windfall that comes from 12/12, and then look to give corrections some of the things that they were seeking around operational staffing and the like that we absolutely don't want. Probably the final question, Tim's just asked for the next EB. Absolutely, Tim. I think the classification structure needs to be fixed. The classification structure makes no sense, and we'll be pushing for reviewing it to try and improve. But that doesn't mean we should sit there and go, great, so next time we'll fix it all. Next time we'll try to fix it all. But unfortunately, we don't get to write, and when I say we, I mean you, us, the union office, the union delegates, the members. We don't get to write our own EB. The QCS has a say in it as well. So we need to spend this time, looking to fix. There's a whole lot of stuff we can fix, not in EB. So all work health and safety type issues we can address. But I think absolutely the classification structure is unfinished business. So that's all the questions I've got at the moment. If you have other questions, email them through to corrections@together.org.au and we'll respond to them. Hopefully everyone has got the ballot now. If they don't, they can email us and we can get the ballot link out for you. We're leaving that open until Friday. So get that through, and any other questions that come through. And there's one from David. Will the pay rates for Cert 4 and diplomas still have to wait the 12 months or so after the time of the lower qualifications to be paid? Mate, I don't really understand that. Can you send an email to just with your number to corrections@together.org.au and I'll give you a call straight after this. Otherwise, thank you all, and we'll see how the ballot goes. Have a great day.